Whoa! The man responsible for the most horrific attack on civilians in modern history was given a standing ovation in the United States last night.
No, don't applaud. Listen. We're in charge.
The US government allowed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to pause from an actual live-streamed operation widely seen as a genocide to address a joint meeting of Congress in Washington, D.C. Protesters, Jewish and non-Jewish, had their banners confiscated. People were arrested for the slogans on their t-shirts, and police pepper sprayed anti-genocide protesters to keep them away from the scene.
We're here to say that we don't want our tax dollars funding genocide. We are willing to put our bodies on the line to say that our Jewish values and our values as people mean that we cannot be funding this.
Now, the media is at this moment going out of the way to present the Netanyahu visit as a Republicans-only outrage, as if the Democrats and independents were entirely isolated from the event. But that's not really true. The House has 49 Republican seats and 50 Democrat independent seats. AIPAC, the Israeli unit that distributes cash to politicians, has raised more money for both Democrats and Republicans than any other PAC or Political Action Committee. And both parties get even more money from weapons makers than they do from AIPAC. Furthermore, Netanyahu has separate meetings booked with Joe Biden, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on his schedule. He's due to meet Joe Biden at the White House today.
I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel after the savage attack on October 7th. He rightly called Hamas sheer evil. He dispatched 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East to deter a wider war. And he came to Israel to stand with us during our darkest hour, a visit that will never be forgotten. President Biden and I have known each other for over 40 years. I want to thank him for half a century of friendship to Israel and for being, as he says, a proud Zionist. Actually, he says a proud Irish-American Zionist.
Now, these are the people who tell you that the Chinese government, which is actively leading the world in alleviating poverty and transitioning to clean energy, they're saying those are the bad guys. What were the Chinese doing yesterday while all this was going on? We'll get to that in a minute. Now, the best hope for the highly controversial event in Washington, D.C. yesterday was for Netanyahu to at least show willing to discuss a ceasefire, but he didn't. Instead, he made this fiery speech demanding total victory for the war, in which some 40,000 people, mostly civilians, have been pretty much mercilessly slaughtered by Israeli soldiers using bombs and guns and other aid supplied by the US and other Western nations, including Germany and the UK. We're not only protecting ourselves, we're protecting you. Our enemies are your enemy, our fight is your fight, and our victory will be your victory, Netanyahu shouted.
For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
The audience roared with delight at this and rose to its feet. Scary stuff. Also yesterday, in China, Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba in Guangzhou, Guangdong province, which is not far from where I'm sitting now, short train ride. Now, the Chinese, who have good relationships with both Ukraine and Russia, are working to create peace in Europe. The Ukrainians are starting to realize that the West, which rejected a major Russian peace proposal on Ukraine's behalf, may not be their best friends after all. Meanwhile, here's a list that shows China's positive relationship with Ukraine before the war. It's a pretty long list of good bits of cooperation, as you can see. Also this week, the United Nations thanked China for its efforts in actively working towards peace in the Middle East. Beijing hosted 14 factions of Palestinians for 3 days of face-to-face talks. The idea was to remove the enmity between them and thus make united peace negotiations with Israel possible. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres very much welcomes the signing of the declaration in Beijing by Palestinian factions, UN spokesman Stephanie Dujarric said in New York on Tuesday. You know, that gives us a bit of hope. It's the first step. Now, I don't know about you, but what's happening in the United States at the moment worries me very much. And I say that as someone who has a strong affection for that nation and who has plenty of friends and family living there. I love to visit. Now, there's now plenty of evidence that the non-existent genocides in Xinjiang and in Hong Kong, yes, like Hong Kong, that we read about on the internet, they're frauds, right, created by US intelligence psyops. I mean, they barely bother to hide it these days. Even the Western media admits to their existence. But the US does that and then turns a blind eye to an actual genocide that we can all see happening live on our phones. You know, if you want a peaceful future, or indeed any sort of future, we need to replace Western global domination with a peaceful, clean energy, multipolar world.
From Palestine to the Philippines.
From Palestine to the Philippines.
And the U.S. war machine.
And the U.S. war machine.
That's the only way that we can hope to achieve peace.
Peace.